Hello there, and welcome to this year's annual Diversity Festival in Northern Devon. And I'm David Chalmers, and I'm the chair of North Devon Sunrise, the hosts of our Diversity Festival. And unlike in normal years, where we usually have our one-day festival in this time of year in Barnstaple, we've actually gone live. And for those of you that have already been watching, you'll have seen that we've been hosting a number of events already through the course of this week, and we will be going right through the rest of the week. And hopefully you're really enjoying them, and we're putting them up on our YouTube channel, and you can watch them later on, or those that you might have missed. Now, Sunrise, as I just want to do a plug for us, because we are at the moment, we are waiting to hear about our charitable status, and we're hoping that's going to come through fairly quickly. It's been taking a while, but with COVID, things have been delayed. That will be a really big boost for us. But as an organisation that does rely on volunteers and being able to bring sort of events like this to you, we do rely upon donations, and we have an Aviva community fund at the moment, the link to which is on our website, on our Facebook page, on our Twitter, and on also links through to us. So if you felt able to just give us donation of whatever kind, no matter how small, it all goes to help us, and I can guarantee that 100% of donations actually come through to us, to our charities. So thank you for that. Now, in Northern Devon, we celebrate diversity, which is what we're doing now with the Diversity Festival. We also challenge discrimination, and we aim to change attitudes. And today, I am really delighted in being able to introduce to you an old friend of mine, but somebody who has been a campaigner for human rights and LGBT rights for a long time in his home of Trinidad and Tobago, but also here in the United Kingdom. Now, the other day you heard, if those of you that tuned in, you'll have heard Michael Cashman, Lord Cashman, refer to the fact that over 70 countries in over 70 countries in the world, it is still illegal to be gay. And Jason was the gay man who successfully challenged the laws in Trinidad and Tobago that criminalized homosexuality and homosexual acts. And actually made a real change. So it's fantastic that we have him here today. I've been trying to get him to come down to Northern Devon for quite a while, but hopefully the next time we will be able to see you here in person. So welcome, Jason. And
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. I'm going to go right back to the beginning, because I want to know what it was like for you as a young boy growing up in Trinidad and being gay. I mean, if you'd like to take us back there, I think it'd be interesting for us to know.
Well, I was born 2 years after we became independent from Great Britain in 1964. And my father, interestingly enough, he was the first Black television announcer in the entire Global South. So on the night of our independence, he was actually the commentator on our national television station that evening as the Union Jack was lowered and our independent flag was raised. So I really am a child of independence. And coming from that background, growing up in a country that is newly independent and of course predominantly Afro-Caribbean, although we do have a very large Indo-Caribbean population, it was a very difficult period for the transition, the smooth transition of power over from white colonial leadership to predominantly Black political leadership. And of course, there's this huge issue at the time of the Stonewall riots, etc. We had decriminalization in Britain in 1967. Then you had the Stonewall riots almost immediately afterwards. At that period, you saw the minorities all coming together in North America to fight together for their rights. So after the Stonewall riots, you had the Black Power, the Black Panther movement in North America, and the feminist movement, all three coming together and met in a historic conference in Philadelphia. In Trinidad and Tobago, we were very conscious of this shift, particularly as one of the leaders of the Black Panther movement, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, was from Trinidad and Tobago. So I found myself in this very strange dichotomy, being mixed race and being very obviously gay. You know, as a young kid, I was quite effeminate, and I did all the very gay things of being in the choir and being interested in theater and music and fashion. So, and also I'm very tall, and at the time I had a very large blonde 1970s afro. So a 6'4" ballet dancer walking down the street in downtown Port of Spain in the 70s was a major target. So I did suffer quite horrific homophobic abuse, and even to today, it's very difficult for me to walk anywhere unmolested. People feel entitled to verbally abuse you in the street. And fascinatingly, on the day that I won my landmark case at the High Court, and I was standing on the steps of the High Court being interviewed by a cadre of, you know, over a dozen press, somebody shouted a homophobic epithet at me while I was being interviewed. So, you know, homophobia is so hardened in former colonies of Britain. And of course, the hardening came from Britain. You know, Britain is responsible for the first ever homophobic legislation. That was in 1533, and it was created by Henry VIII. And it was created with a very, very political intention, which was to remove the power that the Roman Catholic Church had in his court. So by criminalizing homosexuality, he was able to charge a lot of priests and monks and close down a lot of churches, claiming that the religious men were involved with sodomy. So that then was spread by Britain and the Victorian era attitudes across 3/4 of this planet. And even to today, over 50% of the countries that criminalize around the world use British colonial era laws. Unfortunately, Britain has thrown its hands up in the air and not really doing very much about helping to dismantle these laws. So in 1985, I'm half English. My mother is English and my father is Trinidadian. So I have dual citizenship. So in 1985, as a 21-year-old, after achieving quite extraordinary things in Trinidad in the theatre community. I was trained by Helen Camps. I sang with Nina Simone. I danced with some of the most famous choreographers and dancers in Trinidad. And so I came up to London to escape the homophobia and pursue a career in the arts. And of course, in 1985, the LGBT scene was a completely different animal to what it is now. It was much more cohesive, much more coordinated. We had a lesbian and gay center in Cowcross Street in East London. You know, things were much more supportive, and the Greater London Council, of course, was very supportive of the LGBT community. And then, of course, Margaret Thatcher passed Clause 28, Section 28 in 1988. And that was really the germination of me becoming an activist. I got very involved marching at the Section 28 marches in front of Downing Street.
We would have been on the I think.
Do you know Lord Cashman also? I do remember seeing Lord Cashman at the opening of the marches, and we're friends now. So that's such a weird circle, isn't it?
I know.
But yes, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I interjected there, but no, I was on those as well as a young civil servant, and eventually I resigned from the civil service, from the Treasury, because my view is I'm not going to be working for a government that actually labels me a second-class citizen. And we had choice back then. We knew what they were doing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And the Section 28 was so pernicious that, you know, I think it drove many of us of that era. And of course, it was compounded by HIV/AIDS, which at that point was an you know, a Holocaust. In Trinidad and Tobago, we had the second highest mortality rate in the world between
Really?
1982 and 1992. So our community was decimated. I'm very lucky to be alive, to be honest with you. So when I got involved with the Section 28 marches, it really was the start of me understanding what activism means, and, you know, the fact that if you do want to see change in your world, it comes from you. You don't wait for somebody to come and do it for you. They're not going to. You know, nobody's going to ride in on a white horse and save you. And I went back home in 1992 for what was supposed to be a short holiday, but then ended up staying for 3 years and got involved with activism there. The first ever LGBT, I was on the board of the first ever LGBT organization in Trinidad and Tobago in the Southern Caribbean in 1992. And from that period on, I really kind of thought, well, you know, this has to happen in my home country as well. I can't see these progressive moves happening around the world and not be doing it back home in Trinidad. Then unfortunately my mum passed away, and I was in a relationship, and I said to my partner, I said, well, you know, we can go back to London. My mother had left me a small amount of money. I said, well, you know, let's go back to London, do the 2-year Commonwealth visa. That doesn't exist anymore, but back then Britain used to allow people under the age of 28 to come back for 2 years to visit the motherland. And he could have come back. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So we came back so that he could see the motherland, which is my mother's land. And after a year, we were both very clear that our life was much better in Trinidad and Tobago as a gay couple. You know, we were not stared at doing our groceries. We were not followed around at parties. You know, there were no threats of violence. We just melted into the background. And he said, listen, I want to stay. And I said, well, you know, I don't know how. You know, at that point, the only country that was talking about gay marriage was the Netherlands. And he found this organization, the Stonewall Immigration Group, and we started attending meetings. Yeah, it was run by Mark Watson, amazing man.
Yeah,
I mean,
another old friend.
I've learned so much from him. Well, Mark and Wesley Grick, I mean, it still shocks me today that they have not received any honorable mention or national award for what they achieved, which was in fact the first ever positive gay legislation in this country post decriminalization 30 years earlier.
Right.
Mark and Wesley created this fantastic program, doing a lot of backdoor deals with the Labour Party, who was in opposition, promises of votes if they were to pass this immigration regulation. And me and my then partner were one of the 40 test cases that were before the Home Office challenging the law, because the law already existed for unmarried British overseas couples. So we were saying, well, you know, you need to recognize same-sex couples as well. And lo and behold, as soon as Labour swept into power in 1997, 3 months later, they passed the immigration regulation that gave us the first ever recognition of same-sex relationships in this country. So I'm very proud to say that I am the only person on the planet that has impacted on changing the laws in 2 countries. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, so, you know, that again was a huge learning curve, being on the board as a young person with no experience of what this all was, but watching what Mark and Wesley were doing, and really empowering to watch the actual mechanics of activism and how that works and what that looks like.
And there was a real sea change. I mean, I was one of the directors of Switchboard at that time. And the year before, so 96, basically we had no funding, no state support whatsoever. You know, we were sort of hidden away. We were almost, you know, I mean, all our funding came through the sort of the sexual health message that we would put out towards people. The moment Labour got into power, we actually had ministers, we had MPs visiting us, we were given awards, we got funding. I mean, people don't understand the sheer sea change that literally happened overnight in 1997. I mean, they always think
Absolutely.
that it wasn't that. It really was. We were pariahs. We were second-class citizens, and overnight it was changed. And I, you know, of us, I think, you know, talking politics. I mean, those people still have a lot to answer for over those years. I think. But sorry, you were talking about activism, but it definitely those years, you know, we were talking about it with Michael the other day, with Michael Cashman, that it was our training, as it were. You know, we were shut out. We weren't given access. We didn't get the meetings. It's very different. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but when Kaleidoscope was launched in 2011, and then again, I mean, we can come back to that, but it was when Kaleidoscope was launched, it was actually the organisation focusing on international LGBT rights here in the UK. It was sort of to raise profile, make aware, and all these things, because Stonewall it was very much focused on the UK. The doors were completely open. I mean, I remember going in straight away to be seeing Andrew Mitchell, the development minister, who got all the messaging that we were saying, and it was different. There was a different sort of feel about it. Sorry, you were.
No. Actually, that's a great segue, because you and I met in 2011, and I was just about to move back home to Trinidad. Again, another death in the family. My little dog passed away, and I went home on a holiday and realized that things were not just stagnant, but actually moving backwards as regards human rights. And you reached out to me and said, "Oh, you know, can you be our ears and eyes on the ground in Trinidad?" Because the local jefe in the LGBT organization was giving Kaleidoscope Trust beans. And again, you know, this is again one of the very, very big issues in LGBT human rights globally, which is the big divide between the global north and the global south. What we need to realize, and why Kaleidoscope got bashed by that gentleman and others in the global south, was we have to be very aware that if you are coming from a history where people have enslaved you, people have colonized you, and then forced these laws on you, how we go about the dismantling of them have to take into consideration that we were at fault first. And that when we are helping to dismantle, that we don't ride in like the white knight on the white horse and try to take away people's agency in finding their own ways forward. You know, what equality looks like for a Black gay man in Port of Spain is not what it looks like for you in Devon. So we have to be cognizant of that. So when I went back home in 2011, I found, you know, things were in a real state, and I founded another LGBT organization, I Am One, which looked mainly at how we were presented in the media, because in the media, you know, we were presented as pedophiles and perverts and whores and prostitutes, and you know, just the most awful way to be presented by the media. I mean, I did a drag show at the first ever public drag show in a public theater space, and the following week on all the red top headlines, it was Homo Holes Concept. You know, we were treated, we were spoken about in those terms. So I started this new organization, and it was really interesting to see how things shifted very slowly, but you saw the needle shift. There was a homophobic program on one of the news channels, and I wrote a very strongly worded letter to the press. These things actually do work. And the media company reached out to me and offered me a segment of reply. And that reply, really, you saw people's whole ideology and concept of who we were as LGBT people start to shift. So in 2014, I returned to London. Again, I had an issue that had to force me back here. Unfortunately, my activism does not sit very well with my family, so I've been excommunicated from my family. So Trinidad being a very small place and not having social services, if you don't have a fallback family, Trinidad can be a very difficult place for somebody on their own. And I'm literally on my own in the world right now. So
Right.
I came back to London and started working with Kaleidoscope Trust, volunteering and help with the founding of the Commonwealth Equality Network, which is the first LGBT organization that has received Commonwealth accreditation. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I went to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malta alongside of their delegation in 2015.
Yeah.
And on the flight back, I kind of sat there thinking, what was that all about? You know, it just felt like a very empty thing for me. And I decided that I needed to, do something a little bit more out of the box and a little bit more about direct action. And so I reached out to Jonathan Cooper, and I said, Jonathan, I'm thinking of taking my country to court. And he said, great, let's do it. So unfortunately,
Jonathan at the time was the CEO of Human Dignity Trust, which they help lawyers around the world or help individuals to take cases in countries to try and challenge those laws that actually criminalize homosexuality. So another old friend of ours. So
and at the time they were assisting Caleb Orozco with his challenge of the similar laws, British colonial era buggery laws in Belize. So I started work with HDT. Unfortunately, they withdrew support of my case. No reason has ever been given. I've never spoken to anybody about it. Jonathan left immediately after that, and another person that was working there, Peter Laverick, also left. And Peter reached out to me and he said, "Listen, I've been working on your case, on my own, independently, because I find it fascinating, and I think I found a way for you to do this, to take on this challenge, but you will be doing it alone. You know, HDT, once they withdraw support for you, that means everybody will withdraw support. They will all, put their wagons in a circle, and that's it. You will not get support." So that meant I had to do everything on my own. My lawyers all work pro bono. Thank you so much. I mean, this case has cost over £500,000, and all of it has been pro bono work and money that I've raised myself.
Was that, I mean, we often have, as activists, and stand up and make a stance, but wasn't that daunting for you to do that, or how did you to do that? Because you must have actually gone over a barrier, because I can only imagine what that must have felt like.
I think I'm just one of those stubborn people that if you tell me no, I find a way. And I think that there is a certain self belief that you have to really work at this level, and also a certain amount of stubbornness, and I just if people tell me no, I'm gonna find another way. The thing with doing this kind of work is you will always face no's. You will always face people who want to throw you off buildings. You will always face people who think you are second-class citizen or subhuman. So you have to, if you really want to see change, you have to fight above that, and you
weren't just getting nasty words, were you? I mean, you were getting death threats in your home country. I mean,
Unfortunately, Trinidad also has the dubious distinction of having the highest number of ISIS recruits in the Western Hemisphere, per capita, of course, who went out to the Middle East. So, of course, these were Trinbagonian Muslims, mainly Afro-Caribbean Muslims, who went out to the Middle East and trained with ISIS and trained in the jihad. And then, of course, we're witness to the throwing of gay men off of buildings and the intense homophobia, beheadings, etc. So, for little old me to all of a sudden jump up and say, I want to decriminalize homosexuality, it put a target on my back. It was so serious at that point that the American embassy offered me safe passage on their private jet to get off the island. The British government did nothing to support me and has yet to do anything to support me. I've had no support from the British government whatsoever.
No.
So I literally have done everything on my own.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, commendable, but you know, I can only imagine what that must have felt like. And also, you said that you were alienated from your family as well. I mean, they weren't supportive of you doing this, were they?
Oh God, no. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, the thing with homosexuality in the global South, and people, you know, I think don't remember, but you know, we still have this connection to HIV/AIDS. If you're gay, you know, as they say in Trinidad, GAY stands for got AIDS yet. You know, that mentality is very pervasive in our society and culture. You know, the music that you hear coming out of Jamaica and now Trinidad, that calls for the death of gay people. You know, this is what people are dancing to at parties. I remember at the time when Boom Bam Bai came out, I was dancing to it because I didn't know what the man was singing. I don't speak Jamaican patois, and then, you know, my friend tapped me on the shoulder. She said, "Do you know what he's actually singing about?" I said, "No, he's talking about shooting you in the head." You know, so when you have that kind of cultural norm, you know, being played on radio stations and at parties, you know, you could go to a kid's party and hear that song being played. So, you know, our fight is not just constitutional and legislative. Those changes, you know, if you look at what happened in Britain, you had the legislative change of decriminalization in '67, and then nothing for 3 decades. So I'm trying very hard to not repeat those mistakes that Britain made. You know, so I am working very cleverly to look at all of it.
Didn't I, just going back though slightly, didn't I, around that time, I recall that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was actually quite supportive. Was that correct? Or
yeah, that's a weird one. The founder of Kaleidoscope Trust, of course, you know, Lance Price, had come to Trinidad to give the keynote address at a journalism conference. And at the conference, the Prime Minister at the time, who is in opposition now, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, you know, he had a little whisper in her ear and said, "Well, you know, I founded this organization, Kaleidoscope Trust, looking at LGBT rights around the world. You know, what's going on?" So she emailed him, and very lovely email saying that, you know, the issue is with our gender minister, and it is going to be included in our gender policy document. A certain organization in Trinidad leaked the letter to the press, and of course that shut down all forward movement, and she withdrew support. And then she went. She decided that it should go to a national referendum. So you know, the little edge that we had in was destroyed by bad strategy by a local.
But that's one of the things about things say privately and then publicly, and how I know in other countries you have to be so careful about how you perceive and what you do. There was, I mean, you probably recall way back at the beginning, in those around that time when Kaleidoscope was first launched, and there was suddenly there were reports in the press saying, "Oh, that we were going to." Tie our aid going to countries on how they treated their LGBT communities, and that then was leaked, or well, that went into the press. I remember it coming out on a Sunday, and within a week it had gone out viral through the media in certain countries in the Commonwealth. And the message that they had put was exactly what you're saying here. Oh, here we are, the Western countries telling us what to do. They're going to impose on us. It's the old colony, etc., etc. colonial thing, and there was a huge backlash, and which then ended up, and I remember, I'm just taking the example of Ghana, which when there was actually attacks on people in the LGBT community, and on bars were shut down, police went in, and we brought a group of activists over to the UK and sat them down with ministers from the UK, and it said, it was, you know, they had made some sort of slip over a drink at a party conference, and it was basically to make them aware of just that, how what we might be saying and how it's perceived. And they had no intention of actually doing that, or those who
Yes.
become. But that was a direct result of just a remark to a journalist who then put it into one of our papers, and then boom, it went. And so
Yeah.
the whole question, you have to be so
Yeah.
careful. I mean,
Yes.
you talked. I mean, actually, I mean, we could go back. I want to come to this later on, because I think that with all what's happening at the moment with Black Lives and the colonial legacy, etc., I think there's a question there. But I would actually, whilst we're still talking about what you did in Trinidad, I mean, what was it like when you eventually? How did you feel when you heard that you had actually won that case? I mean, that must have been amazing.
I mean, honestly, I knew I was going to win. I would not have bought the case if I didn't know. I had an amazing legal team. I had a strategy. I'm not a lawyer. So, you know, when Peter Laverick brought the strategy to me, if I could understand how it was going to work and why it would win, I knew walking up the steps that I had already won. I also had a very supportive people in the judiciary. The judiciary were very honorable people who look at a human rights case without all of the dramas and whistles and bells. And actually, interestingly enough, the High Court Justice himself is a Hindu pundit. And at the very start of proceedings, he put his hands up and said, well, you know, I am a man, a Hindu priest, I'm a pundit. If that is going to be a problem for you, you know, I will recuse myself. But I didn't think it would be. And I really thought that it would actually be more powerful to have a judgment handed down by somebody who is a man of religion, that shows that he is standing up for the rights of the human being, regardless of his religious beliefs. So, you know, I had this did not, you know, just kind of come together in a very haphazard way. It was very structured, this case. The timing of it was very structured. I filed during our carnival period. Carnival was, in fact, a riot. Carnival began as fighting against colonial slave masters who were trying to prevent drumming, because they believed that drums were being used to send messages between slaves. So, you know, I tried to draw parallels with other human rights issues so that people would understand that I was just fighting for my right as a Trinbagonian citizen. And I was not taking away from anybody else's rights. You know, whatever God you believe in, or gods you believe in, or however you decide to live your life moralistically, that's entirely your choice. What this argument was, the central focus of my case and the strategy, was the right of the human being to dignity and equality under the law. So I knew walking up the steps that I had won. I didn't know how big I was going to win. That was the big shock, because we applied to the court for 6 points in law, and we won all 6. You know, so the team, when the judgment was being read out, and we knew how huge this was, that was the big thing. Very big win. And of course, sorry.
So, no, I was going to say, look, I think you're being modest, though, because you know, you're saying that it was one, but I've seen in other countries where they tried to do this, and they also thought it was going to. And Human Dignity Trust, when they obviously took this on at first, thought, oh, we'll succeed, but they dropped it, whatever reason. Again, I mean, I do, Jason, I think, you know, it was a remarkable achievement. This doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen. We've still got in over 70 countries, 50% of those are a legacy from us of Britain. And, you know, I mean, you know, what you did, and I have read, you know, later on in India, when it was also, you know, steps were taken to decriminalize in India, they cited what had happened in Trinidad. So you were saying in one country has an echo around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, the case was cited twice in the Indian Supreme Court victory, and my case is being taught now in law schools in London, Canada, and University of the West Indies. So what I think people are not aware of internationally is that the case in legal terms is far more progressive in terms of the constitutional reformation that it offers. So, you know, that is the really big key change that's happening. And, you know, since the victory 2 years ago, people do reach out to me and say, well, you know, can you help me decriminalize marijuana? Can you help me do this in my life? You know, how do I address these issues? And that was the big victory for me personally as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. The fact that I am now viewed as somebody that has changed the course of our democracy, and people now feel empowered to do it for themselves as well. So that for me is the very big personal victory.
No, I mean, quite rightly so. Now, the Black Lives Matter, the whole, what we've been seeing around the world over the last few weeks, even tomorrow in Barnstable, there is a demonstration, I think. It's down here. I mean, there's been a couple in the last few weeks. Now, and people are looking at the legacy, the colonial legacy around slavery, around racism, around what this country did, how, you know, it's always difficult to sort of judge the past and the present. But I think that what we haven't done in this country is really looked at the lessons to be learned. And what I'm rather saddened about at the moment with all this is there is the talk around slavery and the impact, but I have yet to hear anyone talking about the legacy of the laws which criminalized homosexuality, which was exactly at the same time and was left in those countries, and what was one of the ones which you overturned. And that is something which it isn't taught here, it isn't explained to people. And even in this debate at the moment, it's not being talked about, and it should. Yeah.
Well, again, and you know, this is why I've started with a group of people, a new human rights organization in Trinidad and Tobago. They very honorably, very kindly and generously have named it after me. It's the Jason Jones People's Foundation. And we are going to be looking at all human rights, not just LGBT, because what I've learned over the last 33 years of activism is you can't pick and choose, you know, which fight to fight, because they all are inextricably linked. So, you know, Black Lives Matter, but what about, you know, queer Black lives? You know, that where is that connection? And it's not happening. And it's because people of color from the LGBTQ+ community are not in these discussions. We are not at the bargaining tables. We have no power in these spaces. So you have organizations like HDT, which is predominantly white-led, white-run, that earns hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in funding and support. And, you know, little old me gets zero. I've had zero money from any LGBT organization internationally, zero, not even bus fare to get to court. So, you know, if you have white, cisgender, tertiary educated, middle-class white lesbians and gay people running the show, of course they're not going to be taking on little old me or little old Trinidad and Tobago. You know, we very luckily, Kaleidoscope Trust is the first large-scale international organization to have at its head a woman of color. First time. I mean, it's like, what is going on? Why is it taking so long? So we started this new human rights organization in Trinidad that will be based there, looking at all human rights, because we need to start somewhere. And as you quite rightly said, you know, with the upswing of the Black Lives Power movement and the introspection that is now happening about the history that British colonial past has bequeathed to us all. Then we thought, well, you know, let's have international desks. So we have diaspora desks in Toronto, New York City, Miami, and London. And we will be working with Caribbean people in the diaspora. Over 250,000 Trinidad and Tobago citizens live in these areas. Now, this is an untapped source. You know, people who live in first world countries that have a much higher standard of human rights engagement. They need to take the messages back home, not HDT, not the white-led organizations, and not the white governments. So the diaspora desks are going to be doing that kind of engagement with our populations that live outside of the Caribbean. And we're also doing, in-country programs. We're just about to develop, we just raised $16,500 US to create a COVID-19 emergency relief fund for trans and HIV positive people.
Right.
Unfortunately, in Trinidad, 90% of trans women are sex workers because they've been excommunicated by family and friends in the community. And 50% of those sex workers are HIV positive. So during the lockdown, they fell off their medication. So we're talking about a huge medical emergency happening. And a lot of these people were not eating, were being threatened with homelessness. So I reached out to Frontline AIDS, which is a fantastic HIV organization based here in the UK. And we were able to raise $16,500 US to help trans and HIV positive people over the last 2 months.
No, that's amazing. And I mean, it fits in with the sort of remit that we have ourselves here at Sunrise in Northern Devon, that we celebrate all diversity. Last year, we had our first Pride Parade through Barnstable, the LGBT community, but the festival it's part of it. We don't separate, and I think that is a very important, strong message to put out there, that to understand that the sort of discrimination that one person feels, it doesn't. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier today who, a counsellor who had said she really got it when she heard Michael talking the other day about how, if you pick on one group, you'll be the next one, and you'll be the next one, and you'll be the next one, and it's the easiest one, whichever one is the weakest link, they go for first. Exactly. And actually, by uniting and celebrating diversity and opposing bigotry and discrimination in all its forms, I think that's where we know we succeed.
Yes.
No, it's. I mean, I've had somebody. What do you the role rather of allies? I mean, I suppose this is what someone that we, for straight allies in your work and what we're doing. How do you feel about?
Well, this is a question that I'm seeing a lot during the Black Lives Matter conversations. A lot of white people, and of course, other races, finding it very difficult to engage with the Black Lives Matter movement because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, or not quite clear on what allies could or should look like. So for me, I think what we have to do is be a little bit responsible for ourselves. If you are an ally, then do your homework. Read some books. There's so much information. Google it. If you want to be an ally, it's all the information is there. I think it's without sounding a little bit too in your face. It's not up to me to train you in being an ally. That is your job, and particularly when you have a history of 400 years of slavery and colonization and the dismantling of cultures and of populations, then it is up to you. That is your history. It does belong to you. You may not have been a slave owner, but you have benefited from the slave trade. Barclays Bank, if you bank with Barclays, you are banking with a bank that was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of Black African slaves in America and North America and the Caribbean. So if you use Lloyd's of London, again, an institution that was created on the back of the African slave trade. So, we can't hold our hands up and say, well, that wasn't me, I wasn't there, that's an ancient history. No, it is not. It is a history and a legacy that we in Britain still benefit from today. The city of London benefits from the African slave trade today. So we all have a responsibility in this. We all have that blood on our hands, and we all must work together on doing it. But don't make Black people or gay people responsible for your allyship. You're responsible for it. If you do bring us a question, or if you have a fear, or come to me. I'm not an ogre. Come to us and ask. But I think it's kind of making us responsible for your allyship, which I don't think is a powerful way forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're familiar with the German term Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with its past, and how Germany, from its past, its Nazi past, it's still ongoing, but it's some. I mean, having gone to school there, it's something that's drummed into us at school, on television. It may be not so much Germany, which is why they've had the problems they've had since unification. But there was a real, in your face. You have to look at what you did and what the country did. You're hiding from it.
Absolutely, and that is what is missing in Britain. There is no talk about the colonial legacy. We have no discussion about Britain's role in all of these things. And even if you look at the award, I don't know if you saw recently, but the Governor General to Jamaica returned his award to the Queen, because the award has a white angel with its foot on the neck of a black-skinned devil.
Really? I hadn't seen that.
Yeah. So, the awards, our national awards, have these racist tropes imprinted on them, and nobody's discussing this.
God.
And, it would be so easy. And I don't think it will happen in the reign of Elizabeth II. I think whoever is next needs to do this. But the word empire needs to be removed from our awards. The empire, it was a dark empire, and the empire enslaved and ruled over 3/4 of this planet, and we are still suffering from the empire. What Britain sees as Great Britain, for the rest of us, was a colonial enslaver of people.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to the community here in the UK, the Caribbean community, because it's said that there is quite a sort of a whether it's true still today, but there is more sort of homophobia. It's more difficult being a young black person growing up and being gay or lesbian in that community. Is that still true today? I mean, how did they react to what you've done?
I think there is this idea that Black people are more homophobic, and it does stem from the fact that these laws are still pernicious across former colonies of Britain, and of course, the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church, and now Muslim religions have all expanded on it. So the homophobia is being taught in our churches. But at the same time, when you look at small town boy, escaping from Scotland to London, it's the same
or North Devon.
So I think we have to be careful on that. I mean, for me as a person of color, definitely, I had terrible homophobia from my family. I don't speak to my family anymore. Literally, if I die tonight in my bed, I'll be found 3 weeks later. So I am very careful about treading that line so that we don't kind of victimize Black people as being this terrible homophobia, when actually it's also happening in white communities and Asian communities.
I was going to say, and Black Pride, I think that has that made a difference?
Well, I mean, of course, I think that if you read C.L.R. James, the great writer from Trinidad and Tobago, he was very good friends with my parents. C.L.R. speaks about identity politics in a very powerful way. He speaks about how who he is as a person was informed by Shakespeare as it was informed by Walcott. He is a man of the world, and so this idea of identity politics taking over the narrative of what human rights should look like, he warned against it, and I totally agree with him. I think that Black Pride offers a very important safe space for people of color. I mean, for me, walking in the regular Pride march, then going to Black Pride, I feel much more embraced. I feel much safer. So
Right.
definitely there is a requirement for it. But we also have to be very careful of tripping over into a sense of identity politics where it becomes so pervasive and invasive of human rights that it separates us more than it brings us together.
Mm-hmm. Were you at our college here when we have LGBT History Month? We celebrated at Petrock College in North Devon every February, and I know that the flag, I think last year, they got a new flag with the brown.
Yes, the progressive pride flag.
Yeah. And I think it was good because it actually explained. People were being explained why it was there. There was a little bit, why are we doing that? But for those that it is a symbol of, ethnic minorities, isn't it? In the rainbow flag. So yeah.
Well, I mean, over in the United States, they tried to introduce that flag, and it was met with huge opposition by the predominantly white queer community. Same thing happened here in the UK. It was met with not just opposition, but outright racism. There was a drag queen in Manchester who had a unicorn defecating on the flag. It was just the most vile thing. So, we also have to be aware that even though we are a minority community, within our community, we have the same discriminatory problems that you have in the wider society. So racism in the LGBT community is a very serious issue. If you look at how Black bodies are treated by gay people, it's quite offensive. You had a situation with a Democratic donor. He donated a couple million to the Democratic Party, and 3 Black men were found killed in his house, and he still walks the streets. So we have to look internally about our own issues and fix those as well. I don't know how we can be asking for inclusion in the wider society when we have such discriminatory practices within our own. I think we need to fix our own house before we go out telling everybody what diversity and inclusion looks like.
No, it's true, and that's actually one of the things with our group here in North Devon, that we do that, and that's why we sort of bring it together, because I'm sure that there is racism there, which or it's that sort of not understanding about others, and it's trying to sort of bring us together. And although sometimes you don't go as fast as you might like on your own, actually there's a real strength in having this sort of diverse, across the board, whether it is our for whatever form. So I really take my hat off to what you're doing in the Caribbean at the moment, because I saw this about the human rights across the board. It's your new organization, isn't it, that you've set up?
Yes.
Really fantastic work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
And we could go on like this for because the hour is basically, we almost are coming towards the end of our time, and it's been fantastic having you with us. I'm going to ask you, just so sort of ending on more on a lighter sort of note, what sort of things have you discovered about yourself in the lockdown?
The hair, my afro has come back.
I shaved mine, and I've decided I definitely don't go with the bald look. This is about 6 or 7 weeks growth, and it's sort of beginning to look
Yeah. Well, no, my afro has come back. So all the people that don't see where the black is, here it is.
Oh, right.
So I'm very proud of it. I tell you, I'm very proud of it. I might dye it blue or something as I get older. I don't know. But definitely, I think the lockdown it's very weird, because I've been working on my own. I have no funding, so I work from home. And this has taken over my life. The last 5 years has been completely about this work. So I don't have much of a social life. And so the lockdown was pretty much, oh, okay, that's my life, for the last 5 years. But what has been really fascinating has been how it has imbued people with a much broader conversation around human rights. And the work that I've achieved in the last 3 months, I could not have dreamed of progressing, for 3 years. I've been trying to do this organization for the last 4 years. And within the 3 months of lockdown, it's happened. So I think it has galvanized people into understanding the interconnectedness to each other, the need to work together, and the fact that human rights is not an esoteric thing that happens outside, to other people. It is something that is important to one's own sanity and self-worth. So that conversation, I think, has exploded, and the Black Lives Matter movement is a testament to it. That could only have happened because of lockdown. People were faced with the murder of George Floyd, that 8.5 minutes. People were faced with that because they were online, bored, and had nothing else to do. That's why he wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. But it happened at a time when we were all focused indoors and didn't have anything. And then all of a sudden, here was this murder of a man that we watched for 8.5 minutes. And that just exploded people into thinking, what world are we living in, actually? It made you stop and take stock. And a lot of people that I speak to now are having conversations with me that I'm so incredibly thrilled by, because I've been doing this for 33 years on their shoulders, and lockdown has really kind of shaken the wax loose, and there's much greater listening now. So
No, as you said, I mean, we sat and watched it. I mean, you couldn't deny it. I mean, there was no, oh, it was a mistake that was happening here or whatever. You only saw part of it or whatever. It was 9 and whatever minutes, 45 seconds of somebody basically being slowly murdered. And I don't think probably I mean, I've seen people, shot, we've seen things, on television, but I don't think I'd ever seen actually happening so vividly. And you're right, I think because we were at home and we were probably able to see it, but it was still such a shocking symbol of how this person in authority just somebody else's life was just not worth. It was so let's hope that some good will. I think there will. I think it is.
I also am very hopeful.
As we said, that this legacy that we're talking about, that people actually take it further, that they don't just sort of stop at the whole Black lives and the racism and the slavery, but also that legacy of the homophobia and just sort of what we did to others, basically. No, that's
I mean,
great.
the key.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that one thing, Michael Cashman, he said the other day that he's discovered he said I'm a recluse. And never knew how much he enjoyed actually sort of being on his own. And I have to admit, I'm a bit like that myself. I always thought I needed people around, and actually you can get an awful lot done. I mean, I think if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have been like you. I needed to be out meeting people all the time, and actually this period has enabled me to, you have that inner strength, as it were, that perhaps it comes with age. I don't know. Age and wisdom, should we say.
Well, I don't know. I have the age. Hopefully the wisdom will hit me one day.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, as I said, it has been a delight having you with us this evening, and it is almost evening at the moment when whenever wants to watch this. And I'm hoping that we're able to invite you down here at some point in the near future in person, because I think that from what you've said today, I know that the college would love to have you there, and especially with the sort of debates that we're having at the moment. Because you've really in your honesty and what you've taught us, and actually you're inspiring, because I have to say, you're very modest in what you did. it really takes somebody quite exceptional to be able to do what you did, Jason. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. So thank you. I think it's a real honor for us to have had you with us tonight.
Oh, it's been my honor to join you, and I look forward to coming down physically when we get a chance.
Yeah. Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you very much.